This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
So today's case is I think it's a wild one. It's definitely a weird one. I sometimes I get these cases and I just look at them and I go, "What's happening there?" And this is definitely a, a very strange one. This was brought to my attention from the family of another case that we covered a while ago. And that case, I don't know the episode number exactly, but the case was the case of Jack Gordon. I talk to them from time to time by email, and they sent me a note over that there. This is what the note says. Hey there, just some thoughts. I don't know if you're still working on this, which I never stopped this particular case. This is always one that I will dig into anything. But if you are, I wondered if you had heard about Jerry Banks. He was caught in Vermont in April of this year. She's sending this to me on May 12th of 2022 after working in Yellowstone. Furry, okay, so this is the case. She says it in a sense, I want to make sure I wasn't giving anything away. John Furry is the person of interest regarding the disappearance of Jack Gordon, age 77. They both disappeared from the Fort Garland area in 2008. So she says, anyway, Furry was known to hang out with a blondish, redheaded kid before he disappeared. This Jerry has the same color hair that would have been around 20 years old at the time. We always felt like someone else was involved as my dad was a large man. This, and she says, Jerry guy was working for Castillo County Sheriff's Office in 2017. So there's an alleged murder related to this. And he was going to Lamar Community College, to get his certification and degree in law enforcement. And she says, I'm serious. No news article has mentioned this, but you can look it up. Do you think he would know something if he was around at the time of my dad's disappearance? Now that he's under arrest, maybe he'd be willing to spill the beans if it would help him. What are your thoughts? So, and this comes from one of Jack Gordon's family members. Well, here are my thoughts. So I haven't been able to get anything specific out of the person she's referencing there. But I did dig into this case over time, and it's a wild one, but it's at the core of it all is basically money, wouldn't you say?
It is basically money. I not to discount their credibility at all. It's just one of the questions I ask is, are they certain it's the same person?
No, they're not certain. They're basically asking if I could dig into it a little bit and just see what I come up with. And I told them that I would, and I still will, and I have. As we're recording this, there's some activity sort of going on behind the scenes related to what I basically sent you a cloud document file to check out. But we're going to go through it and we're going to sort of talk about how it all happened. So, you think we should talk about the murder first, or should we talk about how we get to the murder?
Either way.
Okay, so this is what we're going to go with. This comes from a document that is basically a motion for pretrial release with a memorandum and like points and authorities attached to it. A memorandum of points and authorities attached to it. So what happens here is someone's been arrested, and we get what's known as a procedural history, and then we get sort of a background on the case. And you can sometimes see this with the prosecution or with the defense. The prosecution would be making sort of a motion to keep the person from being released. And in this case, it's the defense making a motion that the person get out on pretrial bond. We're going to start with the procedural history. So, a gentleman here who is the defendant, and so right now he's just a defendant at the time of this motion. His name is Burke Aratay. That's Eratay. He was arrested on May 24, 2022 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, he's being charged in the United States District Court in Vermont. And that's one count of allegedly violating U.S. Code 18 U.S. Code 1958. And now I know you have some U.S. Code experience. Do you know what that is, like off the cuff? Did you know what it was?
I
Or you have to
don't.
look it
I
up?
don't know what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so 18 U.S. Code 1958 is a very interesting code. It is the ability for the U.S. to prosecute anyone who travels or uses facilities in foreign commerce with the intent to murder for pecuniary compensation. It's also known as the murder for hire code. So that's the allegation here. I don't know that you can get a much more serious allegation in federal court except for murder. And the interesting thing about murder for hire is it's treated as murder. According to the indictment, the alleged offense occurred between May of 2017 to in or about February of 2018. And the defense attorney notes that the indictment should be noted as extremely vague. And it says, furthermore, it must be noted that Mr. Aratay has been aware of the investigation in this case for several years. He has been visited by the FBI on at least 2 occasions and was aware that other people were arrested. Nonetheless, Ms. Aratay has never fled, nor has he posed any danger to the community whatsoever. He has retained counsel nearly 2 months prior to the arrest and is in good contact with the undersigned counsel and seeks to address the case responsibly and to defend against the charges. And then it includes Mr. Aratay's background. Mr. Aratay was born in Istanbul, Turkey. He's a dual U.S.-Turkish citizen and is lawfully present in the United States. He has a close-knit family and was raised to have a strong work ethic and compassion for others. He communicates with his family on a daily basis, and they have a loving relationship. Mr. Aratay ultimately moved to Las Vegas in 2012. He was married in 2014 and divorced in 2019. His prior employment includes IT work and website design. He has absolutely no criminal record. He owns his own home in Las Vegas, Nevada, and has no intention of moving from Clark County. Mr. Aratay places a high importance on self-improvement and education, and he obtained a master's degree related to technology. He also owns and operates several technology companies. Furthermore, he owns and operates a business with a partner called Pizza Place. His partner is Halis Kaya, and Mr. Kaya has offered to act as a third-party custodian and provided a declaration which states in part, I have been friends with Burke Aratay for approximately 9 years. I met Mr. Aratay at a Turkish restaurant in Las Vegas. We quickly became great friends. It is my understanding that he lived in Las Vegas for approximately 11 years. I am from Turkey. However, I have a United States permanent resident green card, and I am in the final process of becoming a U.S. citizen. My wife is a United States citizen, and we've been married since 2014. I operate a business called Pizza Place, which is located in Las Vegas, Nevada. We've been in business since approximately January of 2020. Prior to his arrest, Mr. Aratay and I were working on a program for eating type contests in Las Vegas to broadcast on YouTube. He's a valuable part of the business and also assists in technology and marketing. Prior to his arrest, we would see each other every other day. I also stayed at his residence several days per week as we were working on business together. He's a hard worker and dedicated to his career, his businesses, and his education. He has a master's degree and operates other technology businesses. Mr. Arate is a loving and supportive friend. I've never seen him be violent with anyone in any way. He's always respectful and calm. I am very blessed to have Mr. Arate as my friend and business partner. He also has a loving relationship with his family and they communicate on a frequent basis. He owns his own home in Las Vegas, Nevada, and he has always expressed to me he does not want to relocate from Las Vegas. I love these sometimes. Because they get into like the
It
present.
provides a lot of information.
It really does, but they get into the present revered, if that makes sense. It's like they're
Well, yeah, because you're trying to accomplish your prerogative, which, for whatever reason, right?
yeah. I have never witnessed Mr. Arate use any illegal drug. I've only witnessed him drink alcohol on rare occasions. He has other friends in Las Vegas, including members of the Turkish community. He also helps others on a regular basis, including but not limited to trying to help others find employment. I look up to Mr. Arate, and he's a valuable member of our community. He explains that he's read the pretrial forms. He agrees to act as his custodian, basically. It's somebody to hold you accountable. So then these documents sometimes go on and on and on. In this particular case, because it's coming from the defense to start with, they included a lot of things in here that I don't necessarily think I would have included. The biggest thing in here is that they include some statements from the FBI that I thought were unmitigatable. So we start with the defense basically saying, look, this guy's not going to go anywhere. They make the basis that they want him out of jail is what they really want. And the idea of bail is that you're not kept sort of unnecessarily pre-trial.
Right, because you haven't been convicted of anything. It's not supposed to be punitive.
Yeah, unless you're a danger to the community, they just want to guarantee you show up in court.
That's it.
That's the whole thing. So, of course, the government responds to this lovely motion that I just gave you an example of. And they say the defendant, Burke Arate, is charged by indictment for his role in a murder for hire conspiracy that resulted in death, which is in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1958. Accordingly, if convicted, he faces a mandatory sentence of either life imprisonment or the death penalty. As a defendant with strong foreign ties, significant assets at his disposal, and who facilitated a murder for his own financial benefit, Arate poses a significant risk of non-appearance and is a danger to the community. There are no release conditions that would sufficiently mitigate those risks, and Arate should be detained pending transfer to the charging district for trial. And the charging district here is it's a place we're all familiar with, Burlington, Vermont. Their version of events gets pretty detailed, and that's really where we're going to live here for a minute. Several people put this online this year. Law and Crime had it up. It looked like a couple of other YouTubers have it up. This was filed on May 30th of 2022. There are multiple documents in here. I think it gets to about 106 pages in one of the documents and maybe 210 if you include all the supporting stuff, but that's really repetitive. But this is the state's version of what happened with Burke Arate. And I'm just going to be upfront. There are some names in here I'm going to screw up. In about a sentence, I'm going to screw it up. On May 19, 2022, a federal grand jury sitting in Burlington, Vermont, returned a sealed indictment charging Burke Arate and Serhat Gumruka with murder for hire conspiracy with death resulting. And they allege this is a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1958. The indictment alleges that Arate conspired with Serhat Gumruka and others between May 2017 and February 2018 to cause interstate travel and to use and cause another to use interstate facilities in aid of a plot to pay someone to kill Gregory Davis. In separate related indictments, the grand jury charged Jerry Banks, that's who the family member was mentioning to me, with kidnapping Davis, and charged Aaron Etheridge with conspiring to kidnap Davis. The charging documents outline a conspiracy among these four men to have Banks travel to Vermont to murder Davis for money. The conspiracy accomplished the goal when Davis was murdered in January of 2018. Had you heard of this murder case
I had not.
before? It's
Awful.
Yeah, it's a lot. So this case is one of those cases that the way I describe this, and I don't want to seem like I'm minimizing the case or speaking badly of the victim, I always describe these cases as bad movie plots. And that's not to say the adjudication is a bad movie plot or what the victims did is a bad movie plot. It's to say that the things that the defendants are charged with, and at this point we're going to say charged with, are a bad movie plot. And the government, in their response, they lay out the bad movie plot pretty well. So here is that bad movie plot. The government's evidence establishes that Gregory Davis was killed in January of 2018 after he was kidnapped from his Vermont home by a person falsely claiming to be a United States Marshal. In the early investigation of the case, Serhat Gumruka was identified as a likely suspect involved in the murder because Gumruka and his brother Murat Gumruka were the only people who appeared to have a dispute with Davis that would potentially be a motive for Davis's execution. In 2017, Davis was threatening the Gumrukas about going to the FBI with evidence that the Gumrukas were defrauding him in a multi-million-dollar oil deal that the Gumrukas had entered into with Davis in early 2015. The Gumrukas failed to perform on the deal and had made various claims about their attempts to perform. Davis believed the Gumrukas had lied to him about various matters. And during 2017, Serhat Gumruka was facing felony fraud charges in California State Court. One aspect of those fraud charges involved bounced checks that Serhat Gumruka had provided to the middleman in the oil deal, Gregory Gach. On the bounced checks, Serhat Gumruka falsely called himself HRH Serhat Gumruka. Do you know what HRH stands for?
Yeah, His Royal Highness.
What in the world?
I don't know, man.
But you know what I'm saying? When I say it's a bad movie plot, if I wrote this and turned it into a producer, they would just look at me and be like, no, we're not making that. I'm not making that movie. The same year, 2017, Serhat Gumruka was putting together a successful deal that came together soon after the murder, namely his significant ownership stake in a biotech company, Inocean Bioscience. Gumruka therefore had a strong motive to prevent Davis from reporting yet another fraud and likely threatening the Inocean deal. At present, Serhat Gumruka appears to own over $100 million worth of Inocean stock. In May 2022, about a week before his arrest, Serhat Gumruka generated $2 million in cash from an Inocean stock sale. Neither Serhat nor Murat Gumruka had traveled to Vermont to personally kill Gregory Davis, so the most likely plot involved a hired killer. Murat Gumruka, who lives in Turkey, visited the United States between December 2017 and March of 2018. He was staying at Arete's former apartment in Las Vegas at the time of the murder. Federal agents executed a search warrant at Arete's apartment before Murat left the United States. Both Gumrukas were interviewed in early 2018 about the murder, denying any involvement. Indeed, Murat Gumruka falsely denied contact with Gregory Gak, the middleman in the oil deal. Serhat Gumruka falsely minimized his involvement in the oil deal. And Murat Gumruka has not returned to the United States since March of 2018. So the government sees that this murder has happened in Vermont. They've identified that there was money that changed hands between all of these people. There's 4 main people. And they start what's known as a long covert investigation stage. So they basically go dormant. They interview these people in 2018, and then this is right after the homicide takes place. And then they just go poof. And they let these people settle in, get back to their normal lives, and get comfortable. But during this long covert stage of the investigation, after those interviews took place, law enforcement was working to identify the hitman. In 2020, the investigation began to bear fruit, and Jerry Banks was identified as a suspect. As described in affidavits that will be submitted prior to this detention hearing, the government investigation built a very strong case against Banks. Banks, however, had no relationship with either Serhat Gumruka or Gregory Davis. The government looked for evidence that identified individuals connecting Banks and Gumruka. And the government discovered a chain that connected them. Banks was friends with Aaron Etheridge, who was friends with Arate, who worked for Gumruka. Multiple pieces of evidence supported the link. Banks met with Etheridge on various occasions in late 2017 as the murder scheme was being finalized. Etheridge was the first person that Banks telephoned after the murder. Etheridge did not appear to have direct contact with Gumruka, but he did have contact with Arate. The first call that Etheridge made after receiving the post-murder call from Banks was to Arate's phone. Etheridge also had no connection with Davis. Arate was the obvious link between Etheridge and the Gumruka. Did you understand that part, or is that complicated?
No, I understand it.
Okay. It took me a couple of times reading it to figure out like the daisy chain they were doing there because
You're basically having their I never talked to him alibi chain.
yeah, this is them setting up plausible deniability to some degree.
It wasn't a great setup because they found it pretty
No,
quick.
no. It's more details in the bad movie plot. I will say, them being able to get away with it for almost 2 years is interesting to me.
Well, it wasn't that they were getting away from it.
No,
getting away with it. I'm sorry.
It's just that it was all being investigated and uncovered.
Right. But that's when, they probably thought they got away with it.
Yeah, to some degree, I think they did.
Yeah.
So the government developed substantial corroboration of Arate. That's the guy we're talking about, Burke Arate, his role in the conspiracy. His bank records revealed $150,000 in wire transfers from Turkish accounts controlled by the Gumrukas between June and October of 2017. So they're just laying out their premeditation building this murder scheme here. So Arate takes this money and he secretly and carefully transforms this money into cash at the same time. Further, Burke Arate's email account showed that he documented personal information about Gregory Davis in July of 2017. So this is months before the murder, that he has his full name, his date of birth, his place of birth, his cell phone with his Vermont area code. So between 2018 and 2022, the government investigation remains almost completely covert. The co-conspirators here, starting with the murderer, Banks, going all the way to Gumruka, who ordered the murder, likely thought that they had gotten away with the murder. But in April of 2022, the government chose to take what's known as overt steps or move to an overt stage of the investigation. On April 6th of 2022, Banks gets arrested in Wyoming. And during a custodial interview, Banks made a number of false exculpatory statements. Exculpatory statements are when you try to give yourself an out or an alibi, things that make it so you could not be doing whatever it is they say you did.
And I will just say it's better to not say anything at all than to give false exculpatory statements.
Yeah, particularly when it's federal agents, because if you give them a false statement that they can prove is false, then they have a reason to hold you.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day, Etheridge was approached by law enforcement. This is Aaron Etheridge. And as noted in the affidavits that are being submitted with all of this, he denies any knowledge of any scheme in his first consensual interview. But for some reason, he changes his mind and he reaches back out to law enforcement to come clean about his role in all of this. So he's the weak link. Is that what you would call it?
I guess that was Aaron Etheridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like he may have felt like I don't know what ended up happening with him, but he may have felt like he could save himself.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that the federal agents had made it pretty clear they weren't going to just
they've
let it go.
They've got Banks in custody, so he was the actual trigger man, right?
Yeah.
And then so if he knows that, right, there wasn't a direct link between the murder victim and the trigger man, right?
Correct.
And so the wheels have to be turning in their head to realize if they got there, they had to have a path, right?
Oh, absolutely. They got to follow a path that's presentable. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that he was scurrying around to figure out what to do, probably.
Yeah. And so this guy panics. I'm going to call it a panic because there's no other reason to reach back out. Coming clean is how they put it. Ultimately, he reaches out to law enforcement and says, look, I want to tell you what happened.
Gave them all the information they needed.
Yeah, and I'm torn here because, like,
I want them to be in jail. I mean, really.
Yeah. So on the one hand, I want them caught. On the other hand, why would you do that?
I will say that, like, the majority of the time, if the FBI has a case against you, they're not asking you to come in for a consensual interview, like, ever.
Yeah,
they just arrest you. Like, I mean, I'm just saying, like,
well, that's weird because they do ask for consensual interviews, but that's of witnesses.
Well, yeah, they asked for consensual interviews for all kinds of people, including people that they are going to arrest. But if you've committed a crime and the FBI wants to talk to you, it's typically because they need you to give them the missing pieces. I mean, it's true. Like, and that's why they say, like, don't talk to the police. And in the very worst cases, you go in to talk with somebody about something that you didn't do, and you end up giving them information that, like, they can twist to make it work to charge you, right?
Yeah.
That gets pretty deep, though. But yeah, I was just going to say, like, I don't know the whole circumstances, but I wonder, they had enough to... Actually, does it say that they had enough on Banks before his interview? It doesn't really say.
We'll get back to Banks in a second.
But I was just going to say, I wonder if, like, they actually had the whole case or not. But it doesn't matter because we're past that here.
Banks is a custodial interview, so he's been arrested. Like,
okay, so they had enough to arrest him.
Right, but not Etheridge. Banks they have on, like, surveillance and some other stuff. The timeline is sort of wishy-washy here so far. And a lot of this is, well, I don't want to ruin it. But, okay, so Etheridge, he calls the cops up. He calls the FBI up and says, look, I want to tell you what happened. Because he wanted to come clean about it. He admits that he hired Banks to kill Davis and that he had been hired by Arate, who had been his former neighbor and had been his friend for a number of years, and that Gamruku was helping was hiring Arete to hire him to hire Banks. So like there's a chain here. They found the chain with Etheridge's statements. And Etheridge's admissions by the state are they're considered and presented as highly credible because they're consistent with the other evidence in the case, and because Etheridge had no motivation to falsely implicate himself in a murder plot. As of these bail documents here, Etheridge is indicted and detained when these documents are posted.
Which again would be why you don't talk to.
Right, because he's made himself a witness in these trials against Arete, Gumruku 1, Gumruku 2, if he ever gets found, and Banks.
I feel like I'm on the wrong side of justice when I say things like that. So
yeah, I feel a little like I'm a little torn, but that was one of the reasons this case is so interesting to me, because they basically did everything that you're told not to do.
it sounds like Etheridge really was the reason that this is the government's argument against potential bail, right?
For Arete, yeah.
For Arete. And so it seems like Etheridge is the whole reason Arete has been brought into this. Maybe. There could be more evidence, though.
There's a little more, not a lot more, though. So after this happens, they end up detaining Etheridge. The next person they go talk to is Arete. So federal agents come to Arete's home that he owns down in Las Vegas, Nevada, Clark County. And he speaks willingly to federal agents. He made a number of false exculpatory statements, including a denial of knowing anything about Davis. Public service announcement. 1, don't talk to the cops.
If you're going to talk to them, don't lie.
Yeah. 2, if you're talking to federal agents, don't lie.
I would really suggest you not talk to them, though. That's just me, and you don't even have to be guilty for me to say that. Like, it's just not a good idea to talk with law enforcement.
Yeah, I
don't want anybody to get away with a crime. Okay, I really don't. But you can actually hire an attorney and then talk with law enforcement, and they will help you navigate through where you can give them information that you're willing to give them, and not dig a hole for yourself inadvertently. Right? Well, good attorneys can anyway.
I am so confused about what these guys did. Because so then the next documents after these statements are made, it's basically the defense attorney, they laid out the case for, you should let him go. His friend will watch him. And then the state lays out a case for, no, you should not let him go. His friend is not sufficient to watch him. And, that's sort of the back and forth that you have. The government goes a step further, and they start to outline the evidence of everything that happened as far as Arete was concerned and how he was involved. And they basically present all of his emails and all of Gumruku's emails and Etheridge's information, and all but lay out their case that they're going to lay out for a jury.
It's not a bad case.
No, it's a strong. There's a reason they were working for 2 years.
Oh yeah, and it's almost like now this would be judicial efficiency, but it's almost like they're like saying, yeah, we've got so much that you should plead this out now.
One of the things I did want to point out is in the attachments. So they go through, and the way a search warrant works is they present an affidavit, they present an application for a search warrant. They're not super interesting here. Obviously, they're looking for evidence of a crime, and they lay out that they're looking for evidence of murder. They lay out 18 U.S. Code 1512, specifically A1, which is killing another person with the intent to prevent communication to law enforcement. So basically killing someone who's potentially either a snitch or a victim falls under that. Wire fraud, the aforementioned 1958, which is the murder for hire, and then the use of interstate facility or interstate travel related to kidnapping, which is 18 U.S.C. 1201. They lay that out. But what I found interesting was the specific application like that they applied for, what they were wanting Google to do. You can find this guy's Gmail address, but I'm not going to get into that. The attachments here say this warrant is directed to Google Inc., headquartered at Amphitheater Parkway, Mountain View, California. Applies to all content and other information within the provider's possession, custody, or control associated with Google account, and his subject account is what they call it after this, including all data preserved by the provider in connection for a preservation request they received on March 2nd, 2022, which I felt like that was a little late in the game to be trying to preserve something. But I think that preservation request probably means it took them most of that covert period to figure out this tangled web. So these guys did an okay job covering their tracks, just not good enough. And then it says a law enforcement officer will serve this warrant by transmitting it by email or another appropriate manner to the provider. The provider is directed to produce the law enforcement officer an electronic copy of the information specified in attachment B below. Upon receipt of the production, law enforcement personnel will review the information for items falling within the categories specified in attachment B below. And they specify item 1 and item 2 in attachment B. But listen to what they asked for. I haven't seen one of these in a while. This is like a pretty brand new one. So attachment B, item 1, information to be provided by the provider. Within 10 days of the date of service, to the extent within the provider's possession, custody, or control, including deleted information retrievable by the provider is directed to produce the following information associated with the subject account, including any information preserved as described in attachment A. That's the other part of this, but they're not asking for anything there except for that account. A, passwords or other protective devices in place associated with subject account, including passwords associated with an Android device. Communications delivered through the Google service known as Gmail, including any secondary or backup email addresses or forwarding email addresses associated with subject account. Web search history, including but not limited to mobile and desktop browser searches. Email addresses to the subject account. Google Map locations saved and or frequent locations, favorite or starred locations, including but not limited to searches conducted using Google Map searches or Waze services. Google Voice incoming and outgoing phone calls, voicemail content, any and all incoming or outgoing text message history, together with the content thereof to include SMS, MMS, or any other form of text message communication. Communication, including but not limited to audio, video, text message, or chat delivered through the Google Link service known as Google Hangouts. That one is where I want to come back in a second. All downloaded, installed, and or purchased applications, posts, status updates, and any other information, including photographs and or video for the Google Inc. service known as Google Plus, which I don't think that's a thing anymore, but it's in here. Photographs and or videos that are contained or were uploaded in the Google Inc. services known as Google Photos, Picasso Web Albums, Google Plus, or any other Google Inc. service designed to store video, photographs, or data, including the metadata for each file. Electronics files, folders, media, and or data uploaded and or contained in the Google Inc. service known as Google Drive, which is entries created, deleted, or modified using Google Inc. service known as Google Keep. Contacts stored using the Google Inc. service known as Google Contacts, including any contacts stored in the Google Inc. service known as Gmail. This request is to include any and all contact services offered by Google Inc. Historical account information, including call forwarding numbers, account backup telephone numbers, subscriber registration information, sign-up IP address, associated timestamps, telephone connection records, billing information, stored text message content, stored voicemail content, any and all apps installed using referenced email, Google Play Store transactions, call records, IP informations, additional accounts linked by cookies, location history, whether derived from global positioning, satellite data, cell site, cell tower triangulation, precision measurement information such as timing advance, per call measurement data, and Wi-Fi location. Data shall include the GPS coordinates, dates, and times of all recordings, and the origin of how the location of recordings was obtained, and the estimated radius. And they asked for two more things, which is basically everything that they might not have mentioned here they want. But there are two things in here I want to talk about for a second. The first one is Google Hangouts. Have you ever used Google Hangouts?
I think I didn't have to, but I think like briefly I did something so I could see something with one of my in-laws, like they had it set up with a picture or something. It's very removed for me.
Yeah, I use a couple of Apple products that are similar. According to what I read here and what is returned, somehow Google Hangouts records video. Did you know this?
And I don't know if I know it or not, but I have never used it like that.
The other thing that I was a little surprised at, which I know like other people may not be as surprised, is do you use GPS like in your car?
On my phone?
On anything, like in your car,
Yeah, I use
on the
GPS.
phone?
Yeah. I have a GPS in my car, but then I also have my phone. Yeah.
So if you use GPS through anything Google,
Mm-hmm.
they give you like an estimated time of arrival.
Right.
Do you know how they do that?
Well, they just measure the distance between where you're starting and where you're going.
That's how they used to do it.
Okay, then I guess I don't know.
They capture a live, like moving dot map timing advance of you moving from point A to point B. And I just noticed that Apple has a similar thing
Yeah,
now.
I am. So you're basically saying they're tracking you, right?
They're storing it.
Oh yeah, there's no question. Like if it comes down to it and police are successful in getting search warrants when they ask for stuff like that, they're going to know everywhere you've been.
Well, I've been looking more and more at Google search warrants, and I'm getting way off topic here, but I'm doing that because like this case gets interesting. So
I feel like the more you have to do that, either the more of a reach it is, right? Or the more the person tried to hide it is sort of the
well, yeah, I mean, but that's okay, that's not always the case. So and the reason I bring those two items up is uh I was in a city having dinner, and the location that I was having dinner at was, they call it like I think they call it the streets market or something like that. It has like, 50 little stores in it. And it's like a multi-block radius thing. And a lot of times you'll see like arts and crafts fairs or little festivals going on there. So I was having dinner, and to leave there, they had the roads blocked. And the way that so when the roads are blocked in an area like that where it's already like sort of one way, you have to sort of follow detours to get back out. I don't live in that area. I was going to have to drive about 45 minutes to get home. I had just been down there hanging out with a friend and having dinner. And I actually had met up with my wife afterwards, and we were both driving out. But she was parked in one place and I was parked in another place. So I walked her to her car. There was no way for her to drive me back to my car, which is what we normally would do. She had to sort of get on the highway where she was. And I had to walk several blocks back to my car, and I couldn't leave the area like the way that I normally would. I had to go through multiple neighborhoods I'd never been in and follow weird detours. And it turns out about an hour after I was there was a shooting. There was a request to access information from my device because I had driven through the area in some time frame that they had narrowed down to, like, it was something crazy, like 67 minutes. And they were like, we want all the Google devices in this area in this 67 minutes. And I sort of found out about it by happenstance, but there's no way it was just me that experienced this. They turned over a lot of information about me that made me go back through my phone and sort of turn off a lot of shit on it. And in fact, like reconsider whether I was even going to carry it. It's being looked at as an overreach, but they called it fencing, geofencing.
They were trying to narrow down who was the shooter, right?
Yeah, they were trying to find someone that was in this like 1 block radius that would have been this shooter. And I wasn't in the first round of information, but when they didn't find what they were looking for and they moved it out, like it was something small that the judge gave them. Like they moved it out like a half a block or like one street or something in each direction. And when they did that, the detour crossed through it.
Right. And so, that's a whole it's a huge deal as far as like people having privacy concerns. I have people in my life who like have serious privacy concerns, and um all I can say, I'm aware of that being a thing, right? If somebody really wanted to track you, like they could figure out a way. And all I can say to that is I find it highly unlikely they're looking at anything except that very specific thing that they're trying to find, which would be who was the shooter, right?
Yeah, no, I know that's what they were looking for. I was just surprised at how much information was sort of turned over without a fight.
Well, yeah, I guess. Now, they shouldn't have had anything that wasn't Google related.
Oh, they had a lot of things that weren't Google related because
Well, what was
of
who
the
was the,
other words, which is associated cookies.
okay. It
So,
seems
like,
like they wouldn't have that data to give, though, but maybe
yeah,
not.
uh, yeah, I'm going to completely derail this if, like, I get into my terrible explanation for all of this. The gist of it was, if you use Google Maps, there are cookies affiliated with other things that you do when you open Google Maps to search for something that maybe it was in a Safari product before.
Right, like an
But,
address or
but then
whatever.
right, but then you open it in Google Maps, that becomes associated with the information you got it from. So
I see what
it's
you're saying. Yeah. Well, and all I can say for anybody that has access to your particular cell phone data is for them to have fun
yeah,
because
no kidding. That would be like a giant
I have
explanation for somebody.
I have considered all of that stuff. I like my privacy. However, I'm aware that people have access to stuff, and I just always have it in my head that, I haven't done anything wrong. So, you know, regardless of what ends up, coming out of it, that's what I tell myself. I'm like, you haven't done anything wrong. Don't worry about it.
I have not done anything wrong either, and
No,
I'm
I
just
know. And I do realize though that I have a surprising, if somebody that doesn't know me looking at anything of mine, my phone, my computer, they're going to think I have a lot of searches for some really messed up things, just based on the research I do, like for this show, right?
yeah.
All the missing people that are on my computer and all the unsolved murders and all that stuff. I mean, if it got into the wrong hands out of context, it would look terrible.
Oh yeah, mine would definitely look awful. I'm going to steer us back because I want to wrap this stuff up so people understand what this was all about that I was talking about. I'm going to go back to the probable cause affidavit. This is from an FBI agent, but it's actually a pretty simple crime at the heart of this, and it's a terrible one. On January 7th of 2018, the Vermont State Police, they responded to a homicide in Barnett, Vermont. The victim was identified as Gregory Davis. He was found partially covered by snow near the banks of Snowbank by a pull-off area on the west side of Peacham Road. Gregory Davis was found handcuffed and he had been shot multiple times in the head and torso. They list his residence, which they've redacted here because people still live there. And they say that Gregory Davis's body was discovered approximately 15 miles away from his residence. Evidence gathered from the crime scene included 22 caliber cartridge casings. On the same date, the VSP detectives responded to Davis's home and interviewed his wife, Melissa Davis. She advised VSP detectives at approximately 9 o'clock p.m. on January 6, 2018, a male claiming to be a U.S. Marshal came to the Davis home. This male had handcuffs, a gun, and was wearing a jacket and a mask with an eye opening, both of which had U.S. Marshals emblems. The male's vehicle had a red and blue emergency light activated on the dash. The male said that he had an arrest warrant for Greg Davis for racketeering and that Greg Davis was going to be brought to Virginia. On January 10th, 2018, Agent Jenny Emmons confirmed with Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal Carl Staley of the Burlington, Vermont office of the U.S. Marshals Service that Gregory Davis was not arrested by their agency. Further, it was confirmed by Marshal Staley that there had been no active federal warrant for Gregory Davis. Melissa Davis told the Vermont state detectives that Davis had been involved in the oil investment business and had concerns about his business partners being involved in a fraud. In a follow-up interview with Melissa Davis on January 8th of 2018, the affiant is present, meaning the person who's taking out this affidavit here. Melissa Davis stated that she and Gregory Davis were married with 6 children. At that time, Melissa Davis was pregnant with the couple's 7th child. Their family had lived in Vermont for 3 years, and at the time of Gregory Davis's death, the family was living at the above-described residence. Sometime after 2011, Gregory Davis told her that he had begun working on an oil investment deal with a person named Gregory Gack. So Gregory Davis contacted Gack by phone, text, and possibly by email. Gregory Davis told Melissa that he had supply contacts for the oil and that Gack was able to bring in investors. And Davis did mention that Gack had 2 specific investors who were Sirhat and Murat. So she identifies them by those names, not by a last name. Melissa Davis understood that Gack had done business with them before and that they had the means to make the investment. Melissa Davis was told by Gregory Davis that wire transfers had taken place for this investment. The first one was $30,000. A receipt was provided by Gack to Gregory Davis showing the wire transfer from Bank of America. Gregory Davis consulted with a lawyer about this wire transfer, and the lawyer told him it was fraudulent. So Gregory Davis then contacted Gack, and Gack tried to convince Davis that the deal and the investors were legitimate. 3 subsequent wire transfers of approximately $10,000 each were wired by Gack to Greg Davis, which appeared to reassure Gregory Davis. He had told Melissa Davis that 2 additional wire transfers occurred later, coming to a TD bank account for Gregory Davis's company known as Mode Commodities. The first one was for $40,000. The second, more recent transfer was for $75,000. Melissa understood that the purpose of these transfers was for Gack to show Gregory Davis that the investors were real and to provide some compensation to Gregory Davis. The Davis family had lived off of this money and made some improvements to their property at the residence described above. Gregory Davis told his wife that he planned to talk to the FBI about the potential fraud matter and that he told Gack that he was going to the FBI. After the Davis family moved to Vermont, he had taken a job with a company in Barre, Vermont called Safety Clean. On January 9th of 2018, Agent Baker told Agent Emmons that Gregory Davis's cellular phone was located on his body in his inner left coat pocket. The phone is an Apple iPhone, and they list the numbers and they talk about whose account was what. The service provider was Verizon Wireless, but the phone was owned by Safety Clean. Detective Baker told Agent Emmons that Safety Clean management had provided consent to search this phone. So then the FBI Albany field office, specifically their Burlington, Vermont resident agency, ran background checks and revealed that Gregory Gack was a resident of a town in Minnesota. And FBI records show that Gack had been interviewed for an FBI investigation regarding an investment fraud matter. But that investigation was based out of Los Angeles, California, and it resulted in the arrest of Serhat Gumroko. This was in February of 2017. So this is a year earlier. On January 9th of 2018, Agent Hammonds contacted the FBI Special Agent Heather Stockman of the LA division. And this agent advised that she had begun investigating Serhat for a real estate investment scheme and a check fraud scheme. And they list her statements here. She basically says, during the course of the investigation, she learned that Serhat was involved in additional fraud schemes and that he claimed to be an American doctor who had a special cure for cancer and AIDS. There was another scheme involving the oil industry. He was a Turkish national that was living in the U.S., and he was known to be married to a U.S. citizen. I don't think he's involved, so I don't want to list him here, but the name is in the affidavit if people go digging. So Serhat was charged by the state of California with fraud-related offenses. He pleaded guilty and he got sentenced to 5 years probation. The affiant reviewed a July 7, 2017 interview that the LA federal agent had with Gack. Gack advised that he was an escrow agent for Serhat, and he claimed that he met Serhat through a friend of a friend and that Gack wrote the term sheet for an oil investment deal. By the way, friend of a friend always means I have no idea what I'm doing. Do you agree?
Yeah.
It always means
it's not the way to go either.
The investment deal was with an oil trading company named Mode Lauren LLC. And the investors were going to be Serhat and then Murat, who was Serhat's older brother. Gack drafted the terms for this deal, and he expected to receive residuals from the deal. But the Gumrakas did not make payments as specified in the deal's term sheet, and they basically fell into arrears with the obligations to Mode, which is Greg Davis. So Serhat ends up transferring his interest in Mode to Murat. So they put it out of the country, basically. And Gack gets told by a business associate that the Gumrakas were very wealthy and that they were part of the Turkish royal family.
Hence the HRH.
Right. And so Gack tells the FBI that he talked to Greg Davis on the phone, but he had never met him in person. They keep running field checks, and the gist of what happens here is they pull everybody's cell phone records. And this is a long time ago that this is filed. But they pull all of the cell phone records that they can find, and they start to trace the links between Serhat Murat and Greg Davis. There's a detective sergeant that tells the FBI that there were certain messages between Greg Davis's phone and who he thought was going to be Greg Gack. And according to these messages, in a very short summary, it appeared that Greg Davis and Gack were involved in a business venture with investors. There was a contract in place with the investors, and the contract stipulated that if the investors failed to meet their responsibilities, a $75,000 monthly late fee would be levied. As of October 2016, the investors collectively had accrued over $900,000 in late fees. So this guy gave them 3 years to fix it. As of October 2016, Gregory Davis had offered several options to Gack to resolve these matters with the investors so that they could move forward with the business. On December 13, 2017, Gregory Davis texted Gack the following: Greg, it is always best to square things between people. When it is the prosecutor's office, it's nasty, it's hard, and it's very unforgiving. Can we agree to seriously come to the table this week? On December 27, 2017, Gregory texted Gack, happy post-Christmas. We need to get things resolved and settled. Please advise as to what they're going to put on the table to accomplish this. Clearly, the UBS was just another misrepresenting distraction. It's been duly noted. I look for your reply, GD. On December 28th, 2017, he wrote a long text message to GAC, which, in summary, showed that Greg Davis wished to terminate the business relationship under the terms of their contract, and that he basically threatened that the relationship will either, come to a close, or it will conversely end in a series of indictments, clearly civil hearings, and criminal repercussions. This guy is just laying it out that he's just trying to end things. And on December 29th, Gregory Davis wrote a text message to GAC demanding a settlement of approximately $980,000 to exit the business deal. Further conversation indicated GAC was communicating with Sirhat and Murad. There was a final text message to GAC from Gregory Davis dated January 4th of 2018. And this was on Gregory Davis's phone. It says, "There's now been a history of fraudulent banking documentation that has become their standard. In many instances, the banks could not corroborate the claims of the partners. However, in some instances, the banks very seriously denied association with the documents and their intention." With regards the TS, all have had a hand in crafting it. Murat himself was directly involved in the late sheet segment, to which we gave no rebuttal. This was then fully executed. We have suffered multiple banking debacles, which are by itself very serious instances. Therefore, as we've discussed, it would be prudent to address the outstanding accounting. Have Murat and Sirhat present something to speak to. Let's hopefully close that matter and move forward. Without this, our hands will be forced to turn this into the authorities, which neither party wants. Please have an honest but serious discussion with the brothers as regards to all the above, and let's recongregate to resolve the immediate matter and discuss how we move forward. Regards, GD. And as we know, they did not come together to talk about it or to exit the contract or to get any kind of payment. Instead, they killed him.
Now, has GAC been implicated in any way?
So, all right. Since that sort of sums up this story overall, do you want to hear everybody or you just want to hear GAC?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd like to hear, well, whoever's been mentioned. I'm just interested to see how deep it goes or whatever.
Okay, so Jerry Banks pleaded not guilty in June of 2022. He's the actual killer.
The trigger man. Mm-hmm.
He's the former Colorado jail guard who drags us into this by his association with Colorado. He was arrested in Montana while working in Yellowstone Park. There's lots to go out there and read about him. But so he is the trigger man. He has pleaded not guilty. Now, Aaron Etheridge, he pled guilty in July of this year, and here's what that said. This is from the Burlington Free Press, July 22nd, from Wilson Ring. Suspect pleads guilty for his role in 2018 Vermont murder for hire case. A 42-year-old Nevada man pleaded guilty Friday in U.S. District Court in Burlington for his role in helping arrange the kidnapping and murder of a Vermont man. He is one of four men who have been charged in the kidnapping of Greg Davis from his home in 2018. Davis was found shot to death in a snowbank the next day. As part of his plea agreement, prosecutors and Etheridge's defense attorney agreed to recommend a prison sentence of 27 years or less. The actual sentence, scheduled for December of 2022, will be up to the judge. Etheridge could be sentenced to life in prison. Prosecutors say that Etheridge arranged for Jerry Banks, 34, of Fort Garland, Colorado, to kidnap and kill Davis. Banks allegedly called Etheridge the day after the kidnapping to inform him that Davis had been successfully kidnapped and killed. So Banks has only been charged with the kidnapping, but the allegation is that Banks committed the murder. So in court on Friday, he pleaded to two charges in the death of Davis, that he arranged for Banks to travel to Vermont to kill him, and that he conspired with others to arrange the killing of Davis. During this hearing, Etheridge answers a series of questions from the U.S. District Attorney Judge, saying yes sir or no sir. When asked for his plea to the two charges against them, he answered guilty. So they're going to recommend a sentence of 27 for him. He's one of the four. So Banks and Etheridge, that's 1 and 2. Burke Arate is 3, and Serhat is number 4. So
Gak
it doesn't look like Gak is involved in the prosecution of it all. I mean, as far as like, it doesn't look like Gak is charged.
Right. I was just curious because it seems like Greg Davis was talking with Greg Gak as sort of a go-between. That's what the text messages sounded like anyway. Like he was saying, like, we've got to settle this. Let them know that we've got to settle this, right?
Right.
And I was just curious if it didn't necessarily seem like he had anything to do with it, but I wonder if it became like, I think some direct communication here might have helped some, maybe not, because they're killing for money, and it's one of those pointless types of crimes that it's really sad, right?
Yeah.
But like, I wonder if he was just like forwarding all the stuff over to him.
Gak, you mean?
Yeah, like because he's telling him what to tell them, right? He's like, tell the brothers this, right? And if he's just forwarding it to them, and they're going, wait, what's he talking about, right?
Yeah.
Now, clearly, it doesn't get completely into everything that happened, but basically, Gregory Davis had an investment opportunity with these various people, and they pooled money of some sort, and they had it laid out in a business arrangement, a legal business arrangement, it sounds like. And there were terms and conditions, and as time was going on, those terms and conditions weren't being met, right?
Right.
And so he was seeking to resolve it within the investor group itself, so he could break free from it and just get out of it, right?
Yeah.
Because at some point, not only was he not getting a return on his investment that their agreement required, he starts noticing things that look fraudulent, and he's seeing things not adding up. And so he decides he doesn't want any part of it. And from just a little bit we've looked at, he gave them lots of opportunities to get out.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't look like all he's doing here is he's trying to figure out how close he is to having to cut some losses and how can he mitigate that.
Right. And so instead of doing anything at all, it looks like, because I don't know exactly what happened, but whatever it was, it wasn't what was expected, right? And instead of facing anything, going to court and being charged with violations of different financial issues, right, in civil court. So they want to avoid that, right? And possibly criminal, I guess. I don't really know.
Well, the one guy's already on probation, so yeah.
But so instead of just confronting the issue head on, they decide to come up with this scheme to kill the person who's trying to get the original contract enforced, basically.
Yeah, that's where it lands. I mean, so it gets even weirder because even like today, as we're sitting here, I have gotten more information on this case today than I had gotten in many months. That's one of the reasons we were covering it, because I was like, oh, this is just going to stall out. So as of October 5th, I got same guy, Wilson Ring, but he was writing for News 10. I guess maybe this is something they picked up on The Wire. There's a little article about it I was going to tell you. It says, the headline is Cops. Fake 911 call helped unravel Vermont murder for hire. A 911 call that sent Vermont State Police troopers on a search for a non-existent man claiming to have shot his wife was a big clue that helped detectives unravel helped detectives unravel an international murder for hire plot tied to a potentially lucrative yet troubled oil deal. Within hours of Gregory Davis's body being found by the side of a snowy Vermont back road in January of 2018, investigators learned of the deal that the New Jersey native threatening to tell the FBI about his experience with two Turkish investors he felt weren't living up to their financial obligations. 4 years later, charges have been filed. Prosecutors link Los Angeles biotech investor Serhat Gumruku, 39, to two middlemen and then to Jerry Banks, the man who allegedly made the 911 call, kidnapped and killed Davis. Gumruku was arrested in May in Los Angeles. He was returned to Vermont, where he pleaded not guilty Tuesday to the charge of the use of interstate commerce facilities and the commission of murder for hire. Most of the details of the case are in the voluminous court documents that have been filed in federal courts in Vermont, Nevada, and California. Davis, who was born in Englewood, New Jersey, moved to Vermont about 3 years before his death at age 49. Davis, his wife, and their 6 children were renting a house in Danville, about 30 miles northeast of the capital, Vermont. Davis's LinkedIn page described him as the managing director of New Jersey-based Mode Commodities. It also said he had 20 years experience with foreign direct investment programs and that he had advised governments across the world. Sometime after arriving in Vermont, Davis took a job with an environmental waste cleanup company, but the court records and his work history indicate he was involved in a series of investment ventures. After Davis's death, his wife, Melissa, told investigators they lived off of money he received from the investments. That all came to an end at about 9 p.m. on Saturday, January 6, 2018, when a masked man knocked on the door of Davis's Danville home. Melissa Davis described the man as having handcuffs, a rifle, and wearing a jacket that had a U.S. Marshals emblem on it. Their 12-year-old son told investigators that the man drove a white four-door car with red and blue emergency lights on the dash. The man told Davis he had an arrest warrant for racketeering for him from Virginia, and they went away together. Melissa Davis did not call the police. About 15 minutes before the kidnapping, someone called 911 from within a mile of Davis's residence to report he had shot his wife and was going to kill himself. The caller did not provide the name of a town, and police could not find a local road that matched the name given by the caller. But the next day, Davis's handcuffed body was found at the base of a snowbank in the town of Barnett, about 15 miles from his home. He had been shot multiple times in the head and torso. Melissa Davis has filed a civil suit against Gumruku. In court on Tuesday for Gumruku's arraignment, she declined to comment. Within hours of the discovery of Davis's body, investigators had begun to focus on the oil deal as a potential reason for his kidnapping and death. On December 29, 2017, Davis had sent a text to a middleman in the oil deal for a settlement of $980,000 to exit the deal with the Gumruku brothers, Serhat and Murad. That's the same text we already read. Court documents detail how this long, quiet period of investigation for investigators were piece by piece assembling the puzzle that allegedly begins with this 911 call made with a phone purchased by Banks at a Pennsylvania Walmart. Over time, investigators uncovered a chain connecting the 4 suspects. Etheridge had pleaded guilty to hiring Banks to kidnap and kill Davis. Arate was arraigned in federal court in Vermont on July 29th and pled not guilty. His attorney had asked the court to release him, which is the documents we were talking about, but the judge refused. The charges against Gumruku, Arate, and Banks all carry a potential death sentence, but attorneys say the Justice Department are only seeking life in prison. As part of Etheridge's plea deal, attorneys are recommending he be sentenced to 27 years in prison. The FBI refers questions to the case to the Vermont Office of the U.S. Attorney, which the Vermont Office of the U.S. Attorney declines to comment on ongoing investigations, they've learned. The Vermont State Police, which began the investigation into Davis's death, also deferred questions to the U.S. Attorney. Gumruku's Vermont attorney, David Kirby, has declined to comment. In response, by prosecutors opposing his release, prosecutors said that Arate's bank records revealed $250,000 in wire transfers that he had transferred from a Turkish bank to Arate, that had been transferred from a Turkish bank to Arate, and Arate withdrew the money as cash in daily increments of $9,000, that's called structuring. It's not really mentioned here, but that's when you're doing something sketchy to stay just under reporting requirements at that time. Now they look at everything, so that no longer works. He had all the information about Davis, which they reference here in this article is coming from his Google data. You heard that, right? You heard like what the 911 call person said.
Yeah, he said that he had just shot his wife and he was going to kill himself. And he gave an address that was not recognized, but he didn't give the town he was in. They actually traced the purchase of the burner phone that made the 911 call back to a Walmart in Pennsylvania, and they
Yeah.
identified him on surveillance.
Yeah, that's where they get Banks's first photo, I think. So,
And
do you think his intention there was he going to go kill the wife?
I think he realized either he saw the child or he realized she was pregnant and he didn't kill her.
I think he realized she was pregnant, and I think probably if I'm Greg Davis and that's happening to me, even if I feel like it's an arrest as opposed to a kidnapping, I'm probably talking about my 6 kids.
Well, I know, and so yeah, I do think that the plan. So these men communicated like not in person, right? Because
Right.
they're like all over the United States. There's no telling like what they might not have known about him, right? Like for example, he has a pregnant wife.
Or 6 kids.
And I think that, well, honestly, I'm not sure the 6 kids would have saved her. Sorry. I do think her pregnancy saved her though. And because I would say it's very difficult to shoot a pregnant woman. And even when you're getting paid for it, right? So I think that the plan was that he was going to set it up to look like a murder suicide. And when that failed, I just want to say how horrifying. For one thing, if a U.S. Marshal comes to your door with a mask on their face, shut the door and call 911. Right?
I will say if a single U.S. Marshal is at your door with a mask over his face, go ahead and shoot him. Because that's not a U.S. Marshal. They
Well,
come
right.
in. They come
And
in. There's a lot of them when they come.
there's so many things about the situation that so on the one hand, like Gregory Davis probably had never had any sort of encounter. I don't know, but I would say that he was trying to do the lawful thing here and just go along with the arrest and get it straightened out, right? His wife doesn't call 911. So see, they didn't view it as a kidnapping at all, right? They thought he was legitimately being arrested. And the reason I imagine he went along with it was because he knew he could get it straightened out. He hadn't done anything wrong, right? And so that adds this whole new layer of terror to it because basically you've got somebody showing up at the door pretending to be an authority, taking you into custody, and then shooting you dead, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's horrifying because it makes you like question everything all of a sudden. It does take some pretty big cojones to do that, I think, right? Um, to show up at the door like that and say that.
Well, so part of the so do you think Jerry Banks is a professional killer? Because I don't know yet.
I don't
I,
know, but I feel like he had to switch tactics pretty quickly.
I am dying to know what is going on with that dude. Because I don't.
He was
So,
getting paid. That's all.
okay. So, I can't even believe I have to say this. I promise you, your friend of a friend that is helping you with your $1 million investment deal does not know a hired killer. Okay.
Well,
He just
right.
doesn't. So, don't do that ever.
And so if it had been a murder suicide, which is what it sounds like was being set up there, right? There's way less investigation into something like that, right?
We've
It's
talked about this recently.
it's
And
considered to be a domestic issue.
yep, unless there's something seriously off at the scene, like 6 kids saying a guy came in and did it.
So, so if you think about that, right? Of course, he'd already made the 911 call at that point because he did it beforehand. That's the only thing I can come up with, though, because why would you give it away like that otherwise?
I mean, it would be comical if it weren't for Gregory Davis's death.
Yeah, there's several things about this that could possibly be comical in a bad movie, like you said.
Yeah, this is a bad movie plot. Like, this literally stars. Just go with me for a second. You've got Ryan Reynolds playing Jerry Banks, the hired killer, right? And you've got Nicolas Cage playing Gregory Davis, who's only in the first scene. But ultimately, like, what happens when he gets there and Ryan Reynolds is standing there? Like, I don't understand, why does he then shoot Nick Cage? That makes no sense to me. He doesn't want to kill the pregnant wife. I think, like, if you've called 911 and you're going, because it says it's 15 minutes ahead of time, and now you're headed up to the door and you haven't really done your homework. Okay, you're not committing a murder-suicide. You have to literally kill 6 children and an unborn child and the pregnant wife.
And
you have to kill 8 people.
I don't know how much of that came into play. I just know that it wouldn't make sense. The reason the call was made was to substantiate what was about to happen, right? Which was going to be a murder-suicide, a staged murder-suicide, right? And see, with that, call beforehand, it adds even more substance to it. The problem was, if the plan all along was to stage a murder-suicide, then just murdering the man, it throws everything off. Right? Because then there is this huge investigation, and every single murder that is not committed by a true serial killer has a root in love, money, or revenge. Right? And this guy didn't have a whole lot going on except for this bad oil deal.
And he I can't believe they killed him.
I feel so bad for him. Do you know how terrifying?
This is the dumbest murder. Those people are awful.
You know how terrifying? No, you know what I think it is? I think that they hired a stupid person. That's what I think. Because I don't even think that these guys would have approved of, like, what he ended up doing.
Because it's terrible. Like, I don't even know what he's saying. It's not professional at all. Like, he bought a burner phone that can be traced, and then he calls 911. These people have phones. Use the landline. Use the guy's phone when you get there. There's an Apple iPhone in his jacket pocket.
Well, I know, and that's why I just think it wasn't thought out well. And whatever happened at the last second there, right, where he had called 911 and said, "It's I just killed my wife. I'm about to kill myself." I don't know why he did that, except he decided he wasn't going to kill the wife after he got there. And I think it was because she was pregnant. That's my guess.
Thank you for joining us. We are sponsored by LabbratiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabbratiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
Well, Jerry Banks may come up again. Sort of around this case, there may be some stuff that comes up again. I think that's all I have on this one. I really just wanted to highlight a few of those things that was going on and bring a little light to the story because it's going to go through the federal process, which means unless like some savvy news gatherers find it, which it looks like some of them are sort of taking an interest, it might slip through the cracks. You know what I mean?
Right. And, this is one of the worst types of crimes that can happen because essentially Gregory Davis was killed by a stranger, right? But he was sent there the motive is money, right? Um, and if you think about it, I'm surprised this hasn't been more in the news because it highlights lots of really scary things about true crime cases to me.
It does. Well, it was brought to me by a family member from a different case, and I am kind of digging into it from their perspective to see if there's any kind of link. I haven't found anything so far. But I'm not going to go one way or the other. I just will keep turning over rocks because this is an interesting one to me. But it highlights. Okay, you've been arrested, right? I've been arrested like a lot. Have you been arrested?
Yes, I've been arrested.
Okay, but okay. I've been detained in court, like where you're in a court thing and like suddenly a deputy is slapping handcuffs on you at a judge's order. I've been stopped on the side of the road and arrested. I've had multiple outstanding things that have gone on. It's been a very long time since I've been arrested, but when I was arrested a lot. It is terrifying to be arrested.
Yeah, I would agree
It is
with that.
terrifying to be arrested because you're literally being detained so that you can't harm the person that you're with. And that person is supposed to be a law enforcement officer taking you to go through the process. Right. So this type of
moments were terrifying.
Yeah, he's already terrified that he's being arrested, and then he's also being executed.
I can't even imagine what went through his head. It was awful. And so I don't know if the guy was a professional. I mean, he got paid to kill the guy. I don't see what else he had. There was no other reason for him to be involved. He was literally the friend of the friend killing the guy, right? For however much money they offered him. And I don't understand for the life of me.
Why don't you just give that money to...
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I don't understand why they don't make payment arrangements with this other guy. I mean, it's like they, concocted this investment scheme just to steal money. That's what it sounds like to me.
I mean, this is a point where you have to, I don't know what their money is tied up in. I don't know how real it is. I have a feeling that
they spent the money. That's why they're
this is all probably going to be fake. It's all going to be a fake investment, and I say that because they've already been involved in another problem investment. The end of the day, what they should have done is given the 150, 200,000, whatever they were doing with that money over to their investor and said, look, we'll make it right. Just, we'll call it a busted deal.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what you expect from business partners that you have contracts with.
Yeah, he shouldn't have told him he was going to go to the FBI, though.
He didn't tell them that, though. He told Greg Gack that.
Who told? Who said, like, he says he's going to go to the authorities.
Right.
Yeah, that's what he passes it backwards.
Well, right. And I was just wondering if anybody had, addressed that, because it seems like he might have worded it differently had he known that the information was going to go to the other people involved, right? Which, I mean, you should always talk with, the expectation that everybody's going to know what you said.
Man, 6 kids. No doubt.
7.
Yeah, 7. Yeah.
No father. Over money.